You're here, and the racing is back. Yay! Forgive the lockdown hairdo. You're not going to look at my face very much in this video anyway. I just thought I'd do a few things. So for the benefit of new subscribers or those who are perhaps retrying after a long period away, I'm going to remind you where everything lives and how it all fits together, and whether you're new or an old stager, I'll race tomorrow's Newcastle card, and hopefully we'll find a few fascinating snippets along the way. I do want to say that it's about process rather than tipping. Everybody's a bit of a guessing state at the moment regarding levels of fitness and how the form is and so on and such like. I would be no different. I have no special superpowers, although as you'll see I do have some very good. So stop talking, introducing, and let's crack on with it. Over to the computer. So here it is, Monday's mega card from Newcastle, and never, I don't think, can a 10 race extravaganza from the Tapita in the northeast have been greeted with such universal joy. It's a pretty decent card, in fairness. 12 runners a race, 10 races, and social distancing aforethought. Just one thing about the general layout of the race cards before we start. There are a couple of things that are a bit different and quirky at the moment. There's 72-hour declarations, which are playing some interesting games with our back-end processing. So each day I'm having to do some interventions that I normally wouldn't have to do. So if you see things, if you're looking sort of 3 or 4 days ahead, please be mindful that there might be a few little glitches or issuettes in there. I'm working to clear them down each morning, but that's 72-hour decks for you. The other thing that's causing me some problems is even though they must know that if they are allowed to divide 2 races, they will be dividing 2 races. All of the races are massively oversubscribed, so they can know what the race times will be ahead of time. But of course, they have to change the race times at the final declaration stage, and that again is causing us a few unwelcome headaches, which we have to work around. Anyway, those are my issues, not yours, and hopefully when you're looking at the race cards they'll be invisible to you. The one other thing to say, and I will evidence this looking at a report, is that if you're looking, the default reporting period is 14-day form, and of course none of the horses or the trainers or the jockeys or anybody has done anything in the last 14 days, nor even in the last 30 days. So obviously these are going to be empty at this point. If we go to 1 year, you start to see data in the window. So just be aware of that. If it looks like there's no data in the reports, there is, but not for 14 and 30 days. Obviously that's going to populate as time passes, but you'll see some very, very small sample sizes in there. So I just wanted to flag that because it flummoxed me this morning when I overlooked the fact that there'd been no racing and therefore there was no data for that reason, not because our system had conked out. Okay, let's get on with the main body of the show. So how do we set things up? Right, so there's a few things to be aware of. Firstly, in the top right corner here, there are a few things that you can do. So this show filters button will bring up these boxes here, and using those you can filter the races on any given day to the type that you're interested in. So let's say you're only interested in class 3 and above. There's 1 tomorrow, and handicaps only. Let's say I want class 1 to 5 handicaps only, and those are my races. And I can change any of these as I wish. And if I want to reset them, I just hit the reset button and all of my races are back. So that's something to be aware of. If you look specifically at certain races, let's say sprints or pattern class races or whatever it is, jumps races or weather, you can set this up so that you see only what you want to see. You can sort by race time. Obviously, at the moment, that is exactly is one meeting, so that's how it is. But if you went to the second day, for instance, you would see a broader range of races, and they're ordered by race time. You can also have a compact view, which displays it more compact. So that's that. What else before we get started? Yeah, okay, so before I get started, I like to look at a few factors like the going, the weather, and remind myself of the track configuration. So for the going, I tend to go to BritishHorseRacing.com, and I'll just put this in the window for you. Hopefully. And so you can see the web address there, BritishHorseRacing.com. That's the BHA's website. And under the racing fixtures, if you just click on fixtures, upcoming fixtures, you get some really quite detailed information, especially with someone like the Clark James at Newcastle, who tends to put a bit more information on the on the sheet than many others. So it's going to be standard to slow, and he said the Tapita course will be worked deep and reinstated this week ahead of resumption of racing. Given this and prolonged dry spell with warmer temperatures, the course will ride on the slower side. And then there's some information about their fixtures later in the week. Now, when there's been a prolonged dry spell, especially when it's been hot, the surface gets quite dusty, and it rides is basically more stamina sapping, more testing, and the fact that they're harrowing it deep, the fact that the tractors are going to work it a bit more deeply, implies that it could very well be, really quite attritional. It'll certainly, I expect it to find out any horses that are a beat shy of fitness, let's say that. The going is set fair certainly for the Monday, Tuesday fixtures, and so yeah, I'm working on the basis of a pretty slow track. The other thing that I tend to do is to go to remind myself of the course configuration, and the way I do that is on the right hand side across from any fixture is you'll see these course info for all UK race courses. So if you click on that, you will get a window open with various information about the race course in question. In this case it's Newcastle, and in the top right corner there is a course map, and if you click on that you'll be able to see it. Now what you can see straight away here is that races at up to a mile, so that's 5 furlongs, 6 furlongs, 7 furlong and a mile, are all run on a straight track. And straight track races, certainly over 7 and a mile, place a premium on both stamina and jockey's pace judgment. So it's different from round a turn where horses necessarily have to slow down on the turn. So this is another factor that I think is going to place a premium on stamina. You can see the round course there, so 2 mile they go around the loop and then finish down the straight. The straight's about half a mile, mile and a half, mile and a quarter, you can see that. So the key takeaway here is that from a mile, all races up to a mile are on the straight track. And on these course pages there's a bunch of other information like the next races, which you can click to go to them. New top jockeys over here on the right, top trainers, latest results which go back to March. You need to update the fixture information. Latest news, this this Newcastle punting pointers article is a cracker, and if you've got the time, I would definitely recommend you have a look at that. There's some really good information about pace and draw and all sorts of other stuff in there. Like I say, it's quite in depth, but if you have the time, it's well worth a look. Okay, so that's that. So let's get to the races. We start on Monday, of course, not on Tuesday, with a mile handicap. It's a class 6 0 to 65, and there are 12 runners. Actually, before I do that, there's one more thing I want to do, and this is for newcomers. In your menu bar, you'll see a My Geegeez option, and if you click on that, there are a number of race card options that you can update on this right hand side here. So you can choose your odds display. You can show or hide any of a number of, you see we have a lot of information in the race card. It may not all be relevant to you, so if it's just getting in the way and cluttering things up, you can show or hide it from your My Geegeez page. You can choose how much full form you get. We'll come on to that in a second. You can customize a whole range of things that I won't speak about in atomic detail. One thing I will point out is if you're interested in sectional information, this by default is on none, so you need to change it to either data or visual if you want to see sectional data. Okay, so that's that. Right, let's get back to the card. So we have a 12 runner mile handicap. They're going to come down the straight mile, as we know, and there's going to be a premium on stamina. Straight away we can see that Gadbarn HC1, that means he's having his first run in a handicap. Likewise Heavenly Tale. Stonemason HC2, this is a new indicator, he's having his second run in a handicap. What's interesting about Gadbarn is that he's only had 2 runs, finished 6th in both of them, and this is a new BHA stipulation that you can run in a handicap after just 2 races. So that's something to be aware of. There are a few things to be aware of, notably in some of the novice races for 2-year-olds, which we'll come on to later in the week. Horses can be nominated by their trainers as essentially getting a bye from the ballot, which means they're sort of almost guaranteed a run, in order to qualify for Royal Ascot. Now, what this essentially means is that, politics aside, they are probably the best 2-year-olds in the yards, and what we're going to end up with in these early weeks, I think, are a lot of class 4 races that are probably class 2 or maybe even listed class, certainly in terms of the top half of the field. They're going to be very, very difficult to bet in. I will be watching, not wagering, but that's just something to be aware of. Okay, so let's finally talk a bit about the form here. It's a 4-year-old and up handicap, so there's an exposed level to the form, and none of the runners will have run within the last 60 days. You can see that we've got 87, 88, 83. So a few of them have run sort of 3 months ago. The first thing I'm going to do is go to the Instant Expert tab. And what this does, as regular users will know, is it breaks down the form of the race by going class, course, distance and field size. And it essentially allocates a traffic light to each runner for each component. And what I like to do usually is put it on the Place tab to get a bit more data. And we can see there's quite a few here who've not run in a handicap before, or have not run under these conditions. So you can change the handicap to all if you want to get a bit more of their information in, and if you really want to change it up, you can go to all codes as well. You get a picture like that. I'm going to keep it on all weather. I'm going to keep it on the 2-year view as well. I'm not going to look at trainer, jockey and sire, but if you wanted this data, let's say in a race where there isn't much form to go on, you might want to know how the sire had got on under these conditions, or the trainer. You could do that, but I'm not going to do that in this video. I'm going to sort by distance, and what I'm interested in is distance form and course form, because this 1 mile straight is quite a unique test, certainly on the all-weather. There isn't another straight mile on the all-weather, and with it riding slow, I think that's going to be a factor as well. So I was quite interested in Zodiacos, but he's 0 from 2 on the standard to slow. Now if I click on Zodiacos' 0 from 2 here, you'll see that those 2 races show up in line, which is quite useful. And I can see that they were both at Southall rather than here, so that's interesting for a start. It's a very different, the standard to slow there would be a very different surface, the fibre sand to the tappeta. He wasn't beaten a million miles in either of those, 3 lengths and 4.5, so I'm not overly concerned by that. And his overall profile for these conditions is pretty solid, and he's a 20-1 chance. So now, again, it's one of those races where there's a very strong top of the market and unexposed horse. The second favourite is first time in a handicap for a trainer who does well, as we'll come on to in a second. But of those with established form, this guy Zodiacos 20-1 is quite interesting. Let's have a look at the pace tab and see how the pace sets up. Now before I do that, I'm just going to put it on the data view, and I'm going to sort. You see, if I click over here on the DR, that's draw, I can sort by draw. Up at the top we can change the going range or the runner range. We can choose to look at the average of the last 2, 3 or 4 runs. I've got it on 3 here, and we can choose data, graphic or heat map. So this is the data view, and what this enables us to do is to hover over one of the numbers to get a view of how the horse actually ran. You can see this one soon pushed along to lead, so he gets a 4 for leading. If you trust the data, you can go straight to graphic, and you'll see this is a layout of where we expect the pace to be in the race. So we think Ideal Destiny will go on, and possibly some of these drawn high, Heavenly Tale, Celtic Artisan and Al Osdi will be in the van. You can see from this red blob up here, leading under these conditions has not been a great strategy, and again I think that's because it's just quite difficult to lead all the way in these conditions. 0 from 13, a small sample, but it is what it is. Now the held up group have done quite well, not profitable to follow blind, naturally enough, but their impact value of 1.29 is interesting, and the horses that are held up, again Zodiacos has this held up run style, and I think all other things being equal, I think that puts him in with a bit of a squeak. Draw is probably not especially material in this kind of race. If we look at the percentage of rivals beaten, which is a new component, we can see that they're 47% for low, 52 for high. I wouldn't be saying there was anything particularly material in these numbers. Just look at the IV3 as well. And if you want more data on these, more information on these metrics, then we have a page that you can go to look at that. And it looks like kind of middle is maybe the place to be, and that sort of makes sense because the straight track, there's a very good chance that they're going to go down the middle of the course. So I can't remember where Zodiacos was. He's drawn 8, so he's kind of middle-ish. He's not a tip. I'm just he kind of ticks a few boxes. I'm making a few excuses for him around his standard to slow form, which was at Southall. He's probably a bigger price than he ought to be. There are a few other things we can look at. So this arrow with the 1 here tells us that he's dropping in class. He's 1 class lower today. So he ran in a class 5 last time, which we can see there. In fact, he's been running in class 5 for all of these recent runs. And if we go on the full form tab and look at Zodiacos, we can see that he's running the Class 5 for the last 1, 2, 3, hang on a minute, sorry, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So it's a long time since he ran in Class 6, and when he did, he was competitive. So that's interesting. If we another way to do this is just to click the class box here, and we can see that he's had 3 goes in Class 6 and he's finished 4th, 1st and 2nd. So that wouldn't put you off either. He has raced prominently in those races, and he figures to be ridden a little more patiently this time. But he does. That was a long time ago as well. But he does. He ticks quite a few boxes if you wanted to take a flyer for very small money. What else can we learn from the card? Well, that's his recent form, and then what's happened from those races since is over here. The jockey form for James O'Sullivan, again, there's no 14 and 30 day form. We can see that when he partners up with Roger Fell in the last year, they've only partnered up 6 times. They've had 2 winners and another 2 places, making 4 places in total. That's kind of interesting as well. So, and actually James Sullivan, although he has a sort of a 10% win rate overall, he's got a positive actual over expected, which means he's performing above market expectations. So this is quite an interesting runner, this guy. If we look at the trainer form, which is the little guy in black here, I really do need to get some new icons. We can see at the top we've got 1 year form, course 1 year form, and course 5 year form for Roger Fell. Again, no 14 or 30 day form. We can see that his course form is not bad. In fact, in the last year, it's quite good. His actual over expected is close to 1, so he's performing around about market expectation. Impact value slightly above 1. That means he wins slightly more often than average in the last year at this track. None of that would put me off. I don't really look at sire data when horses are as exposed as Zodiacos is, but just for information, he's a Kodiakos, and they've done fairly well on the all-weather at around about this trip, although nothing to write home about. Other things that you can do, if you click on these icons in the header bar, let's say we click on the trainer icon, it will open the trainer form for every runner in the race. So that's a quick way of going down, and you can look, let's say you just looked at the actual over expected column. Now, one thing that's quite interesting here is if we look at the snippets for a horse like Heavenly Tale, who's an HC1, first time in a handicap, a TC, that's a trainer change, and he's down in class. For a trainer with a C5, that means he's got good course form in the last 5 years. We can actually see he's got good course form in the last 1 year as well, albeit from a small sample. The amount of black in the win PL column, and some big numbers there as well, points to Tristan Davidson as a man to note. His first start in a handicap, he's only had 2 runners making their debuts in handicaps. One of them won, a small profit to follow. When he's got a horse from another yard, 4 from 23, 10 placed, nearly 40, over 43% place strike rate. So this horse is probably quite a solid each way bet, behind the strong favourite Stonemason for Mick Appleby. Ali Rawlinson and the Horse Watchers are a pretty robust firm. You can see HC2, this is a new indicator, tells us it's second time in a handicap, and we can see how Mick Appleby has performed with runners making their second start in a handicap here. These are 2-year snippets, by the way, so all these data relate to the last 2 years. One thing that's useful to do is to compare a trainer's overall record with their overall handicap record, and then compare the constituent, sort of the the contextual elements below with those kind of overview numbers. So Mick's handicap form in the last 2 years: 11% win, 27.5 place. Second start in a handicap, 13% and 29.5%. So punching a little bit higher on second handicap start. Trainer change, really interesting. 19% first time from Mick, and 31% place. Those are notably above his overall handicap stats. So, and obviously, you know, chunky profits to follow. Now, 6-4 is factoring a lot of that in already, and it could be that this guy is just for whatever reason, maturity or whatever, it has a coming of age here. In off, you know, 63 would be a pretty lowly mark. This guy's bred, he's bipivotal out of a Danehill mare. He's bred to be decent. Somebody paid 70 grand for him as a foal. Hasn't kind of worked out, but it would obviously be no surprise whatsoever if he was able to go in first time. But at 6-4 in a race like this, with question marks about everybody coming back, I'd have to let him beat me, I think. The two I like, as I've mentioned, are Heavenly Tale. I think looks a pretty solid each way bet. He's very likely, given the trainer's MO, to go well. He's not a massive price, but he's probably going to be there or thereabouts. And for pennies each way, Zodiacos would be one that I'd probably play somehow. Might put him in the play spot or whatever. I think he'll come through and potentially pick up some pieces at 20-1 or so. TSL's interesting. He ran well here last time over 7. He's a hold-up horse often, and well, if he can see it out, I mean, stamina would be a reservation. But if he sees it out, then he'd be interesting. I just think of those sort of 5, 6, 7-1, I'd take Heavenly Tale of those. Anyway, that's that race. I just will have a quick look at one of the novice races. This one, perhaps. And in these races, again, we're in the dark a little bit. The market has this as a toss-up between Magical Journey, who is dropping 4 classes from a listed race last time where he was second. She was second, I beg your pardon. That is clearly good form, very good form. And the trainer, so these are report angles actually. I'm not going to talk about them in any depth today, but I will in another video later in the week. Report angles enable you to essentially drop your favourite reports and whichever, you know, at whatever level you want to be notified into the race card. So this is your, these are my specifications. You won't see these on your race card unless you set them up that way. James Tate as a trainer does well off a layoff, so that's good to know, because obviously this horse is off a layoff. The sire's done well in sprints. The sire is Knight of Thunder, very good sire actually, has done well generally. So I mean that kind of supports the price really. It doesn't excite me, but I wouldn't want to be against the horse. Art Power is another one near the top of the market, but I want to look further down. I want to look at, for instance, this Carl Burke horse here with 2 report angles. He and Ben Curtis have a really solid 5-year record at the track. Really solid. And his Burke's first time out stats are solid as well, which you would see if you looked at the trainer form. You can see there the first start stats there. So he'd be interesting at a price. If you wanted to, she'd be interested, I beg your pardon. If you wanted to get involved in a race like this, I certainly don't. I think that's enough for today. What I plan to do is I'll try and put one of these videos up each day and highlight different aspects. So I haven't looked at any of the reports today, haven't talked about report angles and so on and such like, but I wanted to look at the race card a little bit and kind of tease out a few things there that might be useful, whether you're a new subscriber or an old one, or you haven't even subscribed yet. If you haven't done that, there's a button up at the top here, join Geegeez Gold. If you click on that, you can get your first month for £1, and hopefully you'll find some good winners in so doing. Okay, that's enough for today. Map Design saying thank you very much for watching, and bye for now.